looking receivers on this squad.
A completion good for a first down. The offense working with a new set of downs here. It's an out route. The catch made. That's a big gain before he goes out of bounds. It'll move the sticks. More than enough for a first down.
You know, Chris, you think about it, efficiency has always kind of been the description of a great Alabama quarterback. Man, think about the playmakers that they've had over the last few years at this position. Jalen, Tua, Bryce Young recently. Just a different level of quarterback play and really gives this offense an edge to it.
Second down after that run on the previous play. Off the play fake, looking to throw the football. Junior steps up and makes an impact play.
This is exactly how you can slow down the momentum and a rhythm of an offense. You got to get some tackles for loss and some sacks. This time, they come up with a sack by getting after that quarterback.
Dropping back, it's Moran. Lets it go quickly. It's complete. What a grab near the sideline. Heads out of bounds after a solid gain, more than enough to pick up a first down.
Well, there's nothing better for an offensive coordinator than having a quarterback kind of get into a rhythm early in this game. Another great completion. This guy is off to a great start in this big playoff game.
They're going to run it. Back gets the carry. Tackle made after just a short gain.
See, that's how you limit what an offense wants to do. This time, the defense just won the battle up front at the line of scrimmage, not giving up any big plays. Everybody's gap sound. It's really solid defense on that play.
Alabama now operating in the red zone. Quarterback looking to throw it on second down. Looking to set up a screen pass here. Got a lane. Can he get in? And he takes it in for the score. Touchdown, Crimson Tide.
I'll tell you what, a screen pass is tough to do, but when executed well, the result is this. Perfectly timed by the quarterback to drop it off to the back, gets the big lineman in front of him, all the way to the end zone for a touchdown.
So they'll try to add to the lead now with the PAT. And the PAT makes it 7-0 to open score. Here's the kickoff team. Let's see if they give the returner an opportunity to bring this back. Returner looking to create better field position. And they stop him at the 23. That's solid coverage. First down play call. How aggressive will it be? From the shotgun now. Here's an inside give. They stop him after a 6-yard gain. So 2nd and 4.
Great job by the offensive line here, opening up some holes and giving the running back room to run on first down. Plays like this can open up the playbook for the play caller, allow him to make that defense think, are they going to run? Maybe play action, maybe throw the ball downfield.
That's a solid run, good for first down yardage. Offense moving receivers around now before the snap. Quick pass. Here comes a jet sweep. Breaks clear. End zone ahead. Steps out of bounds, but not before a huge gain on the ground.
Man, I love how they're using the receiver here in motion. With a weapon like this, just get him the football. Simple throw for the quarterback. He's got all that speed built up. You Get him the ball out there in space with a couple blockers, and
he's got a lane. Can he make the end zone? And he'll make it in for the score. Touchdown, Wildcats.
Chris, it's a great touchdown run here by this back, but the continuity of this offensive line was on display, and that's the reason he was able to get into the end zone.
Automatic on the PAT. Kickoff team on the field getting set now. From inside the 15-yard line, bringing it out. And he's tackled at the 21. That's where the drive will start. Here comes the Alabama offense onto the field. They scored a touchdown on the last possession. Let's see if this defense has been able to come up with some adjustments and stop them this time. Tackled at the 32. That's enough for a first down. Alabama comes up to the line quickly.
Boy, this offense does such a great job of putting the threat of the quarterback and the running back on this defense. It puts the defense in a tough spot because it's really hard to take both away. This time, the quarterback gets out and shows you the speed he has as well.
Defense makes the stop after the completion.
I think it's important to kind of let your quarterback get into a rhythm early in the game. Sure, you'd love to see the big gains, but plays like this allow the quarterback to get settled into the game, find his rhythm, and then he can make the bigger plays later on.
Brought down, but not before he gets into enemy territory at the 49. Alabama getting set with a 1st and 10 now.
Well, I know people want to talk about the spread, and Alabama's offense has changed over the years, but at the end of the day, with this coaching staff, it still comes down to the line of scrimmage and the ability to pound the rock. Think about the backs they've had in recent years. Mark Ingram and Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs most recently. This is an offense that still wants to control things up front and beat you down.
Out of the shotgun, he hands it off. Breaking free at the 35. Oh, and he's in the clear now. It's a foot race. Finally goes out of bounds after gobbling up big yardage on that run.
Man, this guy can fly. He gets one crease in the defense, and phew, he is gone. This guy is as fast as there is in the game.
First and goal, they'll try to run it in. And he runs it into the end zone. Touchdown, tie.
Boy, as a defensive coordinator, you've got to be careful being so worried about this.
Y'all know what's going on, man. Big Kamala.
Are voting on it, and for the first time, you're going to see
Camilla Harris hiring when they Reggie.
country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Vote of the people now. It's not coming from the federal government. I did great service in doing it. The Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans.
He didn't really live a life for you to want to know about. He didn't have his life isn't something that y'all should know about.
In one state, it provides prison for life.
He rapped about violence and put out negative vibes into the streets. He ain't really did nothing positive.
What that means. A survivor of a crime of violation
Okay.
of their body does not have the right to make a decision about what
I heard he was snitching too now, Rich.
That is immoral. And one does
No, they said P was snitching on BMF.
deeply held beliefs to agree. The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country.
No, Blue Da Vinci.
Who wanted
Blue Da Vinci and Pee Wee.
women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room, because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot? She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were
You voted for him,
Project
but then
2025,
Here we go. First play of the quarter.
a monitor,
you and Eric voted for him.
pregnancy, your miscarriages.
I said you and Eric voted for him. Girl, I said nigga don't say homie nigga.
Certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President.
Game just good enough for a first down.
Boy, Chris, great timing here with the quarterback against that zone defense, waiting just at the right time to deliver it into that window to pick up a nice gain.
This Kansas State offense is quickly moving down the field. Receiver in motion now. They flip it to him on the jet sweep, and he's tackled for a loss after the catch. The defense all over that one.
Well, that's one of those plays that works better against certain defensive looks, but not every defense is the same. They were all over that one. Let's see if they continue to attack to the outside on the perimeter to set something up downfield.
Quarterback leaves the pocket on the move now.
Nice job of this defense taking away the primary receiver, even the second and third option. But the quarterback's legs are the difference. They almost kept him short, but instead, he gets that first down.
Kansas State getting set with a 1st and 10 coming up. Here comes a handoff. Finding some room at the 25. Touchdown, Kansas State. No chance to catch it. Well, this college football playoff game is all tied up, and Bernie, it's beginning to feel a little bit like a shootout.
Yeah, it is. It's a battle of the offenses. Both these teams right now executing flawlessly, and they're doing so with such high stakes, answering one score with another. Neither team is backing up 1 inch.
It's a squib kick. It's going to be fielded by one of the up men. Here comes the Crimson Tide offense onto the field. On that last touchdown drive, they just pounded away with the ground game. Let's see if that formula works again.
Hey, it's a great job of this defense containing the running game. But if I'm calling the plays, I'm not abandoning the running game just yet. I think it's important to have some sense of balance. So throwing and running is essential. Stick with it.
Catch made on the out route. Runner scoots out of bounds after gaining decent yards.
Well, the running back that time just kind of sneaks out of the backfield and shows his hands on that nice catch.
Offense looking to keep the drive going here. 3rd and short now from the 44. Quarterback's got it on the option. He'll toss it to the back. Runs through the defender. Ball carrier heads out of bounds, but the pickup was good enough to move the chains. First down. It's an important first down on that running play. The defense with pre-snap movement of its own. Again, thrown out of the RPO, and it's complete. They get him down, but not before he moves the football to the 32.
You know, plays like this are what Alabama offense is all about. They run the football, and then they're efficient within their passing game. Think about it. They won a couple national championships with Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron by just being efficient and playing smart at the position and being a great complement to that running game in the defense.
And this is dropped. Would have been a huge game, but he could not collect it. Now moving the receiver now before the snap. A pop pass on the jet sweep. They stop him, but it's a first down.
The defense has got to do a much better job here of adjusting to the pre-snap motion. They just kind of stayed in place, and it gave the receiver plenty of room there to make a nice play.
This line getting set up. It's a first down play. Here's the option play. Pitch to the back. And a decent gain there before the defense brings him down.
Because I just love to see this offensive line in this running game able to establish themselves. This back is already over 50 yards. We're in the first half, so really good job of establishing the run game. Opens up the play action, opens up one-on-one opportunities. Just keep winning the battle up front.
An important third down conversion coming here in the red zone. And the quarterback keeps it on the option. Will he score here? Touchdown, Bama. Still no answer for this offense.
And sometimes you know the quarterback's going to run the ball. You put your defense in position, and he still gets yards. In fact, he makes them pay for it, gets all the way to the end zone.
And the extra point splits the uprights. Now the kickoff team is out on the field. He's going to bring this out a few yards deep in the end zone. Solid coverage there. They get him at the 15. That's where the offense will take over.
Real life, no TV.
We know the numbers
Just me and Gigi. Just me and Cable. How you gonna steal the swag and turn around and get who called you?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond this to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here, you bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
The people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people on television say the dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if you didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond.
Yeah, thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the families. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me they can write books, with nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy, look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists, they have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But, just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they're taking their criminals off the street and they're giving them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been...
Facts. Like, like, this is crazy coming from a criminal. Like, you're a felon. This is a multi-time felon talking about niggas eat cats and babies. What is this nigga? Somebody shoot this nigga on sight, man. Somebody go ahead and shoot this nigga, man. Y'all would never let me get away with this. I can't even.
And respect for law enforcement. The
You feel me?
president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. The American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest of the appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA of New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand that this is someone who has openly said,
There's a favorite cracker there.
I'm quoting, terminate the
There's a favorite
Constitution of the
cracker.
United States. That he would weaponize the
That's what they told
Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed
Want me to tell him that?
disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrail. Because certainly we know now that court won't stop him, we know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Facts.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy. The fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line.
They've got a tough decision to make here on this 4th down and short.
Here we go on 4th down. He powers into the end zone. Touchdown, Kansas State. Kurt, they were backed up to start the drive, but some bold play calling, great execution, and they reached the end zone.
You know, it's easy to just kind of pull your horns in and get conservative when you're pushed way back close to your own goal line, but not this offense. They came out, showed the confidence.
For fracking. My position
The
is
fuck is
that
fracking?
They get set to kick it away. Turn starts inside the 15. Will be tackled at the 17. Strong job by the coverage team. So here comes the Alabama offense back onto the field. They were able to punch it in the end zone last time, looking to do the same thing here to see if the defense can make adjustments. They'll stop him behind the line for a loss of 1.
I think we all kind of get caught up in third down. What's an offense doing on third down? But I think what's also important is how well you defend first down. If you can hold your opponents to a short gain or a tackle for a loss, you throw the offense out of whack, and their game plan gets much more challenging to try to come up with that first down.
It's a keeper all the way and a really solid gain. Kirk, this defense was worried about stopping the QB run today.
Yeah, with a guy like this as a defense, you got to add an extra guy down into the box area because of the threat of his legs. If this offense is smart, run this guy maybe 8 to 10 times a game because it puts so much pressure on the opposing defense. That was a great play.
To throw, it's Moran. Quarterback finds a target on the right. It's complete. Good execution. Gets a block and gets the first down.
Well, the receiver does all the work here. Man, that is easy living for this quarterback. Really good footwork by the receiver. Gets the separation. And at that point, it's just pitch and catch for the quarterback.
They tackle him, but the gain moves the ball to the 36.
Nothing better than an offense on first down to be able to pick up big positive yards like that. You can either keep giving it to the back, or it can set up play action.
Shut up, Charles.
The line of scrimmage, and you can throw it over top of it.
Tackle made after a nice pickup on the play.
Boy, how about that play, Chris? That thing just opened up the back shot through there with great acceleration.
That nigga funny, ain't he, bro? That nigga Trump different, bro.
Okay, they're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. You don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out to Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices
It should have been wrestling.
were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar. But they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil. These are not good things for the environment that you understand.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I asked, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it. But when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes,
I have nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me, it was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. I want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their job. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't want the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on that. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they've destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jessica, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed. Those people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue of both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short. Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge it at all. You say that sarcastically, you know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls.
Let's go, man. I've been in a heated battle with K-State. Reggie, why K-State like this?
Good elections. Our elections are bad.
I know. He got this running back. This nigga's just shifty, bro. Right, he finally threw a pick 6, so now we have 2 scores now, finally.
People are trying to get them to vote, and that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisper, we didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
looked at it,
and said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you do a special on it, I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you, we have so many facts and statistics that, you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the President there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker, so he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks ago. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us, we won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he has had a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom work with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China
Hey, stop.
And I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one. He ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline.
But Trump gonna send us the world talking like this. He's saying that shit on like a platform.
Going all over Europe and heading into Germany. The biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if you weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
Your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that not 3,000 Palestinians are dead, nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7th, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know